The president is slamming new revelations in the Russia investigation. Earlier, he tweeted this: "There is no collusion. It is a hoax. There is no obstruction of justice. And that's a setup and a trap." Then he focused on North Korea, China, and NAFTA. Now, this all comes after the Washington Post reported Special Counsel Robert Mueller may issue a subpoena for the president to appear before a grand jury. Michael Isikoff has a new book called Russian Roulette: The Inside Story of Putin's War on America and the Election of Donald Trump. Michael is also the chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News. He's following the latest with us from Washington. So let's talk about these latest developments in the Russia investigation. You've got an article out right now, and the title is "What Mueller's Questions for Trump Reveal About the Investigation." We learned that the special counsel wanted to ask President Trump in an interview a series of questions, and this article basically decodes the list of questions, beginning with the very first one that we're putting up on the screen right now. Collusion is very much still on the table. I want you to break down these 4 points that you make in your piece.
Sure. You just look at the questions, and there are several that clearly relate to questions about collusion. There's one about was the president aware of outreach to the Russian government by members of his campaign, including Paul Manafort? That seems to suggest that Mueller has some information to that effect. There's another one asking the president what he knew about efforts to set up a meeting between him and Russian President Vladimir Putin during the campaign. Now, that appears to relate directly to the efforts of George Papadopoulos, who is a cooperating witness in the Mueller investigation. He pled guilty to lying to the FBI, and we know that he presented a proposal or told then candidate Trump himself at a meeting in March about meetings he had in Russia, in London, with people who were offering to set up this summit. And as we report, David Korn and I write in Russian Roulette that Papadopoulos has told investigators for Mueller that the president encouraged him on this score. That was new information, and told that Trump told Papadopoulos he found the proposal interesting, and then looked to Jeff Sessions, who was at the meeting, and not as if he expected Sessions to follow up. So that's a hint that Papadopoulos has told Mueller that he got a green light from Trump, which might explain his later meetings with these Kremlin cutouts in London.
And so of these sort of 4 points that you lay out in your piece, collusion is very much on the table. Potential witness tampering is also under scrutiny. The attempt to do business in Russia and what President knew about the Trump Tower meeting. I wonder then, and it's also sort of something you point out in your piece, that if you are the president's lawyers, do you put him up in front of the special counsel for an interview? I mean, you at one point say it could be legal malpractice to do so.
Yeah, I think the odds of the interview clearly are much lower today than they were a month or so ago before these questions were first presented to the president's lawyers. It's hard to imagine his legal team giving an okay for a sit-down for an interview with these many broad, open-ended questions that could clearly go off in many directions and would expose the president to possible perjury charges. So I thought the most interesting development today was that tweet that you read from the president saying that the obstruction issue, which is what was the nominal reason for the Mueller interview before we saw this list of questions, is a setup and a trap. That seems to be very tonally different from the president's prior comments, public comments indicating that he was willing to sit down with Mueller. I would say at this point, it's unlikely that he's going to.
Well, but you, and we spoke to our Jeff Pegues about this too, that if the special counsel can get a meeting and an interview with the president, that might portend for wrapping up the investigation sooner rather than later. But you write in your piece that there is an opportunity for the president and his lawyers to resist on the grounds that Mueller, as an inferior officer of the executive branch, doesn't have authority to require the president to do anything. But if we look at precedent and you point to Watergate and President Nixon, Nixon, he wanted to withhold the White House tape recordings that were subpoenaed by the special prosecutor Leon Jaworski, and he lost that fight. So how do you see it ending?
Well, look, I think that the Nixon versus USA is clearly the precedent that Mueller would rely on if he were to subpoena the president and the president were to resist. It's not 100% clear that that precedent is on point. In the case of Nixon versus USA, Nixon, the then special prosecutor Jaworski, was seeking tapes, not an interview, that were relevant to an ongoing criminal trial of Nixon's top aides, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, John Mitchell, the former attorney general. That is a set of circumstances that is, that is different than the one that Mueller and President Trump are facing. So it is, as I wrote in the piece, it's entirely possible that the president's lawyers will roll the dice and fight a subpoena in court, take it up to the Supreme Court, and hope that they get a better ruling from the Supreme Court than Nixon got when he resisted Jaworski's subpoena.
And finally, House Republicans, as you know, are demanding information on this Russia investigation, and some are threatening, some House Freedom Caucus members are threatening to impeach the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. I thought it was remarkable. I want to get your take on the Deputy AG's comments yesterday, where he said that there have been threats and that the Department of Justice, he said, is not going to be extorted. And I thought that was sort of remarkable that he's acknowledging that there have been threats made to him, and not physical threats, obviously, but threats to impeach him, and that he's not going to be extorted. That word extortion is, I think, sort of key.
Yeah, look, I thought those were very tough comments by Rosenstein, and clearly shows he's got a backbone here, and he's not going to kowtow to the House Republicans or, frankly, to the president himself, because the president, in another tweet this morning, seems to be encouraging the House Republicans who are demanding these documents that Rosenstein clearly feels are sensitive and not to be shared with the with the Congress. They are investigative documents on about an ongoing matter, and DOJ has traditionally resisted turning over material that relate to an ongoing matter. Now, when the other documents relating to the Hillary Clinton investigation, maybe he'll give those up. But let's remember, Rosenstein is in charge of the Mueller investigation. He's the guy Mueller has been reporting to. Everything Mueller does is being approved by Rosenstein. So a shot at Rosenstein is a shot at Mueller, and Rosenstein knows that. The House Republicans know that. The president knows that. So this is looming as a real battle to watch, particularly, and remember the wording of that Trump tweet today, saying, "I may have to get involved."
Right.
That seems to be a threat that he's going to direct Rosenstein to do something Rosenstein says he's not going to do. So we could have a resignation there if the president acts on what he said in his tweet.
Yeah, I mean, the president tweeted, "A rigged system. They don't want to turn over documents to Congress. What are they afraid of? Why so much redacting? Why such unequal justice? At some point, I will have no choice but to use the powers granted to the presidency and get involved." The question, of course, Michael, is, let's just say the president does get involved. Is it clear to you that if something happened to the Deputy Attorney General, if Robert Mueller was removed from this and the special counsel dissolved, that this would somehow end the investigation into President Trump?
It's not going to end the investigation, and there are all sorts of practical difficulties here. For one thing, were the president, I mean, there's two scenarios here based on the president's tweet. He directs Rosenstein to turn over the documents Rosenstein says he's not going to turn over, in which case, given Rosenstein's comments yesterday, I think it's highly likely he resigns. The alternative is Trump fires him. And then the question is, who takes his place, and who would do the president's bidding. Next in line is Noel Francisco, the Solicitor General. We don't know where his head is at on these various matters. You'd have to find a confirmed person to fill the position of acting Deputy Attorney General, and it's not clear who that would be. So there are a lot of imponderables here, and this can go in a lot of different ways. But I do see the president's tweet this morning, and coupled with Rosenstein's comments yesterday, as pretty ominous and perhaps headed for a real confrontation.
And finally, I guess you mentioned the Solicitor General. We remember, if we again use Watergate as precedent, that when Nixon had the Saturday Night Massacre, Robert Bork became that person that you're talking about, right? Which is, who is willing to carry out the president's wishes, the president's orders. Robert Bork became that guy. You're saying right now it's not clear who would be the Bork character in this drama.
Look, there is an ethos within the Justice Department that law enforcement should be independent, nonpartisan, and not directed from the White House. Law enforcement investigations, particularly investigations that go directly to the president and his team. So I think it would be really hard to find somebody at the Justice Department who is accepts that ethos, has embraced it to do the president's bidding, to do what the president wants to do. You know, we just saw that the State Department ceremony, and now Secretary of State Pompeo in his brief remarks clearly showing the kind of loyalty the president wants to hear from his underlings. But the president has never appreciated that the Justice Department, the FBI, law enforcement is different. It's not the same as the rest of the executive branch. So, you know, that's why this is so dicey for the president.
Things are certainly heating up. Michael Isikoff, so great to have you, sir. Thank you very much for sticking around. We appreciate it.
Thank you.